Ladies and gents, I have been wanting to review this auto rifle for quite some time. I've acquired a number of rolls, and sadly, I would say none of them are really God roll. They're close, and I would say for the most part, many of these rolls will serve me just fine. But we're going to talk about some of the rolls that I have, as well as the God roll for this auto rifle, why you should be going after it, and understand, even though today, this 360 round per minute auto rifle isn't exactly meta, it takes one change for Bungie to make in the future to suddenly see weapons like False Promises, Half-Dan, Pluperfect, Gahalran's right hand. These autos are some of the best feeling auto rifles in the game. They just have a time to kill that is somewhat lacking. Now, before getting into today's review, we have a sponsorship. Ah, yeah. Raid Shadow Legends, fellas. It's a game on both mobile and desktop. It's your classic turn-based RPG game that I'm not gonna lie to you. You either like it or you don't. There's no in-between with this type of style of game. I remember back in the day when playing turn-based strategy games, I would actually draw charts up of my different champions, my team synergy, and you had to manage all of this by like paper, okay? There was no beautiful readout of like hidden attributes on your champions. All that stuff was like self-discovery. Raid, though, has kept that same turn-based strategy formula that many of us grew up on, but have expanded on it. They literally have tons of champions to choose from, all of which have a faction that they come from, each with their own intrinsic perks and skill sets that are intrinsic to their faction. A lot of depth here, guys. And if you think there's a lot of depth there, things like artifacts and accessories, the things that you can actually equip to each and every one of your champions, especially when we start talking about set bonuses, this adds to the depth of this game, which is kind of shocking considering it's a mobile game. Now, I think a big issue with all these games is what about connectivity? What about playing with other players? Raid actually has a ton of resources online that you can dip into, all the way from their YouTube channel, their Reddit, as well as their Discord with over 87,000 people. On top of that, in-game, you also have clans, which I heavily rely on inside of Raid. One of the statistics is like 216,000 clans have been created inside of Raid. So whether you join my clan or any clan, I do urge you to try one of the clans out. It's a great feature that really helps out in in-game content. Now, if you happen to be a new player, maybe you're interested in this game, down below in the description is a link to Raid Shadow Legends. And as a new player, you get 200,000 silver plus the free champion Grinner. A fantastic champ, very powerful, but this link is only good for the next 30 days, as well as the rewards. So feel free to get on that. And again, your little mailbox there holds all of these. Again, big shout out to Raid for sponsoring today's video. Now back to the review. Look, I like 360s, okay? I'm a little biased toward 360s. Maybe it's my affiliation with Dan, but Dan's got some problems. That problem being something called sunsetting. Not that I'm actually bringing Dan into in-game content, but that is a reality, right? So far, Dan is looking to be sunset next season, which means it won't be good in in-game content, which is where False Promises comes in. Now, we recently reviewed Cold Denial. This is another weapon for this season that you can obtain through Umber Ingrams. And again, you can focus these things even more, those Ingrams, to allow you to get those weapons more often, or have a much higher chance of getting them. Now, we also recently reviewed Cold Denial. Cold Denial, fantastic pulse rifle. And when you use it for the first time, you would never guess that it was a high impact pulse. But it is. It just doesn't feel like that. It feels too snappy. It handles too fluidly. False Promises is another prime example of a weapon in an archetype that doesn't feel like it belongs in that archetype. False actually feels really good. Now let's talk about a few of the rolls that I have. First up, here's my most consistent roll. This is like the roll that as the gunfight goes on, False Promises get stronger. You got Dynamic Sway, that improvement in accuracy and stability while holding down the trigger. By the way, Dynamic got a buff in this most recent sandbox. Also, Eye of the Storm. The weapon becomes more accurate as well as boosting handling as your health gets lower. So you got a combination of these things working together. One boosting stability, the other one boosting accuracy the moment you hit that critical range of health. A very good roll. My only complaint is I felt like Eye of the Storm didn't activate as often as I would have liked. 9 times out of 10, Eye of the Storm, the moment it activated in a 1v1, I was dead. You know what I mean? You got a 600 round per minute auto rifle shredding you, a Gilliard, a Gnawing Hunger, a Suros. Sure, Eye of the Storm will proc for you mid gunfight, but there's a good chance you're already dead. Now my next roll. This one was like my roll for PvE, which was very interesting. It came with subsistence, kills partially reload the magazine from reserves, but reserve capacity is reduced. I do want to mention that Subsistence is a hell of a lot better post Shadowkeep, right? When Shadowkeep launched, that Subsistence perk actually got a buff. You actually have more there in reserves than what you used to have in the past. So if you've been rubbed wrong with Subsistence, understand it's in a much better spot. Now this weapon also comes with Rampage. Kills of the weapon temporarily grant increased damage, stacks up to 3 times. I'm also rocking this with a Rampage spec, which allows us to hang on to those stacks of Rampage for 1 extra second. Now I've had this exact same roll on 600s. I've never had it on a 360 though. An auto rifle that's hitting substantially harder inside of PvE, simultaneously present in the kinetic slot, so it's doing even more damage, as this Subsistence Rampage roll is normally something I have on auto rifles in the energy slot. Just recently showed it off in our Gnawing Hunger review, but I've got the same roll on things like Archaeologic. It's always been a fantastic roll. It's a trait combination that transitions well between both PvE and PvP. I just always wanted this trait combination on a weapon in my kinetic slot. And we may already have that, I just don't have that roll, at least until now. False Promises inside of PvE perform very, very well. I was very impressed with this. I think the only difference I would have made is potentially adding on a magazine perk there instead of armor piercing rounds. And I would actually swap up between armor piercing as well as high caliber between both PvE and PvP. But even then, I think I would still prefer a mag perk over armor piercing. So those are my 2 standout rolls. Both of them that I really liked, but let's talk about the god roll for this weapon. First up, let's get into the numbers. This gun has something very unique over other auto rifles. Number 1, in comparison to other weapons within the same archetype, it actually has a higher zoom factor. You take Gahalran's right hand, even half Dan, as well as Pluperfect, they all have a default zoom of 16, whereas False Promises here has a default zoom of 20. Now that 20 is actually pretty significant. When we actually sit down and start testing damage fall off for these weapons, False Promises actually can go all the way up to almost 40 meters, around 37, 38, just by having a base default of 20 zoom. Now for point of reference, when we look at our other 360 round per minute auto rifles, things like Ajo Bond, even half Dan without certain scopes, Pluperfect, those weapons start to experience damage fall off at about 31 meters. And some of them can only go up to about 34 meters. Dan is the only exception that has zoom scopes that allows it to go all the way up to almost 50 meters, but you got to deal with those scopes, right? The scopes are super clunky. So to me, a huge benefit about False Promises is that it allows you to have the best of both worlds. The fluidity of a weapon that doesn't necessarily feel like a 360 round per minute auto rifle, the best default range amongst all 360s, and depending on your trait combination, this can be one of the most level weapons for you to have in that mid to long range. Which brings us to our god rolls. I very much enjoyed the majority of the rolls that I play with, and all around, even the most default basic roll that you can get on this auto rifle still feels very, very good. For PvP though, I do want us to talk about Killing Wind and Unrelenting. Killing Wind is a fantastic perk. It allows us here to gain that boost in mobility as well as weapon range and handling for a short duration upon getting a kill. The only problem is you gotta get a kill first. Unrelenting, not a bad trait, but not one I would be banking on with this weapon. Unrelenting right now, at least in this sandbox from what I've seen from other random rolls, would be a really good perk if it can go side by side with damage dealing perks. Say you had Kill Clip or Multi-Kill Clip or Rampage or something like that in combination with Unrelenting, getting those multi-kills, triggering that health regeneration, you would see that trait be a lot more effective. But because this is a 360 round per minute auto, because it only has a 0.83 second time to kill value, you need damage dealing perks. Swashbuckler, Rampage, either one of those will help you tremendously on this auto rifle. The only downside is that the magazine size could be a little bit better, right? Especially when we start talking about Swashbuckler. Now granted, if you're loading out for a melee build, Swashbuckler ×5 is something you can easily achieve. Now I did try the combination of Dynamic Sway and Zen Moment together. Kind of an interesting one, right? I gotta say I like the combination. Matter of fact, if we lived in a sandbox where 360s had a better time to kill value, say they get a buff next season or something, that would be a hell of a combination. Both of those makes this weapon super sticky, and once both of these traits get going, this is such an easy weapon to maintain. Honestly, I think Light GG might have it right here. High Cal, Dynamic Sway, and Zen Moment together. Oh, no, it won't be the best right now, but if you're hunting for a god roll on this weapon, that's not what you're really going for. At least that's not what I'm going for. I'm prepping for the future sandbox where 360s inevitably get a buff. Now, as far as PvE goes, hands down, guys, Subsistence, Rampage, or Swashbuckler, pick whichever one you want. Fantastic here. I know some people are going to say, whoa, what about Feeding Frenzy? Feeding Frenzy just doesn't feel nearly as good as it did before, right? Like, it got a nerf in this sandbox, and to me, I think it was the hardest hitting reload perk out of all of them. Telling you right now, the 2 traits I would go for since this has occurred is subsistence or overflow. Either one of those, and like an overflow swashbuckler combo, let's say something like an Actium War Rig and a magazine perk, fellas, absolutely disgusting. You'll be able to shoot all day long, and anytime you need to just refresh that damage bump, rock it with a melee-based build, something like Knockout in front of Assault, boom. Now you got another buff to even stack on the Swash. Sounds nasty? Well, it is. So guys, that is our review here for False Promises. A good auto rifle. One that won't be sunset for quite some time, and considering that many of our other 360 auto rifles are on its way out, when the time comes, when 360s finally get some love, False Promises will 100% rise to the top of the list as one of the best auto rifles in the game. Currently right now, I think it's still one of the best in PvE. Again, this is exactly what I've been hunting for so long. A 360 present in that kinetic slot that can roll these trait combinations. It doesn't get much better than this, guys. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.